Yes, you're right. What's going on?
We're discussing politics.
Yeah,
Right, good.
man's talk, really.
Man's talk.
Probably a little bit too highbrow, to be honest, for the ladies.
You reckon?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
yeah.
In whose opinion?
Everyone's
Everyone's
opinion.
opinion. You haven't
In
got
your
the vote.
opinion?
You haven't got the vote yet. So...
Your opinion?
Yeah, definitely.
Are you sure?
Fight.
I'll leave you to it because you absolutely disgust me.
See you later, man. Go think about some sewing or stitching or the like.
I want to get it later.
Ladies, I've just heard the men. They're talking about politics down there.
All right. That's very silly. Dangerous.
Fools.
Oh, I don't know.
Or the election, I think, because it's the vote soon, isn't it?
Yes.
By all accounts.
Shame we can't vote.
I know. They're talking about who they're going to vote for, what's going to happen. And, of course, we don't have that right. I may not care what they're discussing. It's probably so boring that I'd rather be doing the washing up anyway, to be honest. But it's about the choice. I choose to join in or not. That, for me,
As an equal.
As an equal, that's the thing. It's whereas at the moment it's a not, as opposed to I can if I want to. That's the difficulty that I have with it.
Absolutely.
It was a self-fulfilling prophecy again, wasn't it? Or self-fulfilling assumption again. Just like keeping the poor dirty because they like to be dirty, keeping women stupid because they are stupid.
But the other thing is, women couldn't choose their own occupation either. And it was only very strong, forward-thinking, you know, really
Strong
passionate women that actually started to do something about that.
Women were good enough to look after the home, and yet they weren't seen as clever enough to think about who they would like to have rule the country.
On election day in 1906, women couldn't vote, but men could, and they did so in their droves.
I think the fact that there was 83% turnout means one thing, and that's that the poor were desperate to voice their opinion. And by voting, that's exactly what they did.
While the men vote, the women of the slum and James go to nearby Victoria Park to meet historian Dr. Louise Raw.
It was actually the first park in Britain, perhaps even in the world, that was actually created for working people. It also became incredibly important around the turn of the century for suffrage, the campaign for votes for women.
3 years earlier, Emmeline Pankhurst founded the Women's Social and Political Union as a radical reaction to previous campaigns. Emmeline led the organisation with her daughters, Christabel and Sylvia. They believed this new movement needed to be militant if it was going to succeed. They became known as suffragettes. During the same period, women in the East End had become increasingly politicised. Sylvia Pankhurst saw an opportunity. She came to the East End and galvanised the activism of local women, forming the East London Federation of Suffragettes.
The campaign, the fight for suffrage, becomes increasingly violent and bloody as time goes on. This is all-out war between women and the establishment. The East London Suffragettes hold a Women's May Day here in Victoria Park. And as they got to the gates of Victoria Park with a huge procession of women, 50 detectives who'd been undercover disguised as market stallholders suddenly leap up from the stalls and attack them. They drag this chained group of 20 women inside the gates of the park and assault them. They're punched, they're kicked, they're hit with truncheons, and Sylvia was dragged off by 4 detectives. It took 4 big, strong men to arrest one small woman. She was thrown face down on the floor of a taxi cab, and one of the policemen said to her, "I don't know why you just don't give up. You're never going to get the vote." But one of his colleagues said, "They will, you know." So she took a lot of comfort from that even the police could see that the times were changing.
While the men are out voting, the women of the slum and James commandeer the House Tailors shop to start their own East End suffragette group.
Let me know when we win the vote, and I might have threaded my needle by then.
Not even being recognised as human beings must have been so terrible that to even get the moral substance to rise up against it just shows how amazing these women were. I am proud to be an East End suffragette.
What do you think, James?
Great. Cool.
Matchy matchy.
I think I would have been a suffragette because if I had a daughter, for instance, in that time, I would have fought for everything. If there weren't suffragettes, then most of the women nowadays would be still slaving in the kitchens, and they still wouldn't have the right to vote.
I think it's lovely that my son was so fired up about the suffragettes. I'm glad it shows that as a 21st century family, we have, equality in our home.
But it would take several more years for the battle to be won. The 1918 Representation of the People Act finally gave women over 30 the vote, and in 1928 this was extended to all women over the age of 21.